In this video, we're going to talk about how peace and safety will lead to sudden destruction. As a reminder, and as quoted in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, starting at verse 1, it says that, "But concerning the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you." Verse 2, "For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord comes so as a thief in the night." Verse 3, "For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape." Well, we're going to identify who these people are that are saying peace and safety that brings about sudden destruction. And we're also going to discuss why peace and safety in and of itself leads to sudden destruction. It's not just a conventional meaning of peace and safety, but it's a type of peace and safety. What I'm going to do before I continue is I'm going to put before you a series of scriptures that explains this, and you tell me the common denominator that explains this whole concept of peace and safety leading to sudden destruction. I'll be right back after this. Kind of peace and safety that I'm talking about, the common denominator between all of those scriptures is that it's a false peace and safety. And you'll see that God, in those cases, did not tell the leaders of Israel or the prophets. See, this was a problem that was that was consistent from politicians all the way to the religious leaders of Israel. They were saying the same thing. And they were saying, "Oh, don't worry." And I'm paraphrasing, "Don't worry, nothing's going to happen. There's nothing wrong. All is well. We're building back better. The economy is much better. Everything is good. Nothing to see here. Keep it moving," right? But the true prophets would call it like it is. The true prophets were like, "No, there's a serious issue here." So it was not just any kind of conventional peace and safety, but it was a false sense of peace and safety. The priests and the politicians were lying to the Commonwealth, saying that everything is okay. And they would also say that God told them to say that everything was okay, when in fact everything was not okay. And so when the attack came from Babylon, no matter how much the true prophets tried to warn the Commonwealth, when the attack came from Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar, a lot of people were taken back and they were destroyed and killed. So that brings forth the sudden destruction. In the last video, I talked about identifying in the last days where everybody's going to be running. And we know that one of the most common places to run for shelter and security, or to receive peace and security and safety, is the church or the synagogue or the temple. No matter what your faith is, we always look for spiritual enlightenment so that we can put our mind at ease, because again, the reality of life in those streets can be somewhat treacherous. And we run to our spiritual corners to seek solitude and help. But I'm going to say something that's very tough. I did say also in the last video that it could be also those places where you run to that offers a false sense of security. Well, what do I mean by that? How could a church of all places offer a false sense of security? I believe that churches on a majority scale, I'm not saying in its entirety, but on a majority scale, there's a problem that exists in the body of Christ where people are being told things that they want to hear, but they're not being told the things that they need to hear. And in the Old Testament, God also had a problem with the prophets not being honest with the people of Israel concerning their iniquities and things that got them in trouble in the first place. Those prophets were more being paid to tell them things that they wanted to hear, but not things that they needed to hear. And that's what brought about their self-destruction. So I would say that if you're attending a church, and I'm going to be very careful when I say this, but if you're attending a church and you're not noticing any fruit develop in your life, but you find yourself becoming giddy and happy with the things that are being said, the cliches that are being tossed around to and fro, nothing against positive thinking and positive speaking. But if in the long run they're not producing positive fruits, if they're not producing fruits that improve your life, then it's time to step back and ask the Lord, is this the place that I should be going? Or do I need to be in a place that's going to tell me what I need to hear for these times, not stroke my ego? Now, going back to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, if you look very closely at chapter 5, verse 3, it says, for when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman. And look at the very last sentence that it says in that verse. It says, and they shall not escape. The reason why they shall not escape is because, first of all, they're living a facade of denial. They're living a life of denial. They don't even realize that there's a problem that they need to address because they think that they're perfect. And what I'm saying is sometimes when you're in church, you'll hear some things where the preacher will say, well, look at your neighbor and tell them thus and thus. And it strokes your ego. You leave church on a high, but when you hit the world and you hit reality, it doesn't match up with what you're confessing in church. And a lot of times, if not all the time, the Lord is wanting us to be honest with what's out there in the world. He wants us to come to terms with what's really happening in the world and not try to escape from reality. The Lord, you have to understand, you see, he has raised you up to look at reality in the face with the authority of Christ and overcome every hurdle in your life. Well, Daryl, it sounds like you're saying you have to live a life of looking over your shoulder. No, you don't have to live a life of fear, but you always must be watchful and mindful of what you say and who you say it to. You always want to make sure that there's no deceit in your mouth where you're offering a false sense of security to someone and stroking their ego just so that they can like you. In all ways and in all interactions, we must be honest with what we're saying. We must learn how to tell the truth in love. My time is up and I thank you for yours. I thank you so much for watching this video. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. God bless.